All right, so let's get into it. Let's look at World War I. Man, I'm not sure where the best place is for my face right here. I'm just going to throw it down here, I guess. I don't know. Okay. Oh, what was that? Okay, so World War I actually had many names, and that's because when you started it, you didn't call it World War I. You know, it was just the European War, and then they called it the War to End All Wars. By the way, I don't need notes on this. And then they called it the Great War after the war. But it wasn't until World War II did they actually call it World War I. A lot of the same players, and also very large. So just a quick overview of it. Okay, so this was 1914 to 18. It was the first industrialized war, like we see down here. Factories were producing mechanized weapons, were much more deadly. Everything from tanks to machine guns to warships. And it was the first global conflict because, well, we have all these nations with colonies. The major players all had colonies somewhere. All right, it ended with millions dead, including soldiers and civilians, and actually half the soldiers became casualties, either dead or wounded, which is a very high amount. So it was not the war to end all wars because 30 years later we get World War II. And then what we'll see is we also see the hegemony, I say it wrong, dominance, basically one nation over others. So you kind of think of like imperialism, but usually this is usually done more directly and more through military action. And we're going to see that shift from Western Europe towards Soviet Union and the United States. They end up being more like that later on, okay? All right, and we'll see some shifting borders. So this is in your activity. So if you didn't get it done, here you go. What changes do you see? And I think you'll see that there's a lot of countries that claimed independence off of Russia while they were very weakened. And at that time, Lenin actually gave up those territories. We see Germany shrink. We see France gain some area, and we see Austria-Hungary break up. So usually it's the losers that break up. Russia wasn't necessarily a loser. They were just very weak after the war. They lost over 70% of their troops, and they're going through a revolution as well. All right, so kind of leading up to World War I, though. Okay, so it was a relatively peaceful time, and that's because a lot of nations were transforming politically, and they had economic transformations as well because they were industrializing. Also, a lot of countries are focused more outside their borders, over in Asia and Africa, because they were busy building up colonial empires. But there was tension building, specifically between Germany and France. So Italy and Germany, they unified their people under nationalism. They were late to nationalize, or not nationalize, but to unify. It wasn't until 1871 where they wanted to be. And there was this race to build colonial empires, and they were late to that. So they're kind of left out. So that was kind of tension. Also, Germany has strengthened its economy and military. At this point, it's getting to be stronger than France. And in the Franco-Prussian War, we know this because France is still upset. They lose Alsace-Lorraine to Germany, and they're not forgetting that. And so Germany and France, they start to form new alliances with other nations. We see France with Russia, and also Great Britain, and we see Germany with Austria-Hungary, and also Italy as well. Okay, so there are four main reasons that we'll kind of hit on. All right, so militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. And a lot of you detected that yesterday in class. That was great. So these are the main causes, long-term causes, things that have been building up for quite a while. So let's do these one at a time. So militarism. So this is the glorification of military and the readiness for war. I think of a perfect example right now is maybe like North Korea. Okay, they show a lot of pride and strength in their arms race and being ready for war, kind of pounding their chests. There's competition to build up your weapons, your armed forces. You know, when one nation increases its military, the other nation does so as well. You could say this is similar to what the Cold War did to America. So the example at that time, though, is the Britain. They built the Dreadnought. It was the first like battleship. When we think battleship, you know, having huge guns and very much armored. This is the Dreadnought battleship that Britain built. And, you know, Germany's like, what are they doing over there? You know what I mean? So it revolutionized Navy technology and redefined the standard for what a battleship is. Germany went to work constructing their own destroyers. This is the classification. It's called a destroyer. And they started building some as well, and that's making Great Britain pretty uncomfortable. And so during peacetime in Europe, these militaries also doubled. So militaries a lot of times will increase, but they don't usually increase very quickly unless it's wartime. And this is during peaceful time. So you can see increased military spending, double or more in some countries, and also the troops doubled or more in 40 years. So that's militarism. Then alliances. So in 1914, Europe was polarized by alliances. You were either kind of on this side or that side. The initial intention was to preserve national security. The idea is that you would dissuade aggressors under the threat of triggering a larger conflict, because if you attack one, then you're attacking so many others. However, something small can end up becoming very huge if you have to back up those other people, right? So we have on one side the Triple Alliance, Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary. So Italy, Germany, Austria-Hungary. But they were also giving aid to Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire was as too. So Germany also had some sort of alliance with the Ottoman Empire. And on the other side, we have Russia, France, and Britain. They were part of the alliance. And they also were aiding the Serbians. So this is where the conflict is going to be that causes these big players to jump in. And Russia also had agreements with Slavic nations in Eastern Europe. So the Balkan region down here had a lot of Slavs or Slavic people. Those are people of kind of like Russian descent. So the Balkans ends up being this powder keg, all right? So Austria-Hungary is many different peoples in it. It's not like France and Germany where a lot of people are same heritage, culture, and language. You see lots of different languages, religions, and backgrounds. And these people are pushing away. They would like independence. The Ottoman Empire is failing in this area. And so as the Ottoman Empire shrinks, a lot of these nations are claiming independence. And Austria-Hungary, they're going to kind of push into this area. Okay? So we look at this cartoon. We have, if you touch me, I'll. If you make a move, I'll. If you hit that little feller, I'll. And it keeps going back. And you just see, what is message is this cartoon conveying? Right? You make one threat, and you got all these people backing it up, right? You even have England jump in at the end. All right. So that's alliances. Imperialism. Okay, this is one we already hit on, so it shouldn't be too foreign to you. It should be very, very familiar. So remember, imperialism, you're seeking materials and markets. And because of that, Europe was looking for markets and materials all over Africa. And by 1900, the British Empire extended over 5 continents, and France had control over many areas in Africa. So the amount of land owned by Britain and France was huge, and Germany, who wanted to enter the scramble to acquire colonies, but they were late because they were late to unify. And so, Germany was fighting for this, but like France, they almost went to war after clash over interest in Morocco, which is up here in 1905. So the climate was ready. So Germany wants to get in this area. There's already tension about it, and I don't know if jealousy is the right word, but that's basically it. And then the last one is nationalism. So nationalism, we think of this as a unifying force. We saw that in Italy and saw that in Germany, right? It's the intense pride and devotion to one's country. Think Uncle Sam in a way, or like here's Britain. Once you join the country's army, God save the king. Nationalism, you're following all these people, and what we see is a lot of people's tragedy at some point. Nationalism fueled militarism, right? You believe your country is the best, and that, of course, you should have the best military to beat and spread your thoughts and ideas. So expanding territorial boundaries and compete industrial economy as well. Nationalism couldn't be a unifying force, was it like for Germany and Italy, and this is for the most case, but not in Austria-Hungary, okay? It's different. It's a source of division because nationalism is more about the nation of people than it is the country and government, okay? So it desired ethnic groups in Austria-Hungary that had a common language and history to seek their own sovereign state as opposed to being part of a larger empire, okay? So we see this again, this is the Balkans area, all right? So this Ottoman Empire over here was retreating over time, and by 1913 it was completely out of the Balkans, just about. And what it is these countries started getting independence, for example, but Russia and Austria-Hungary both hoped to gain supremacy in this region. The Balkans, it became a hotbed for nationalism tension, and this was called the powder keg. So you had a lot of different countries or a lot of different nations, a lot of different peoples that wanted their own. Okay, one example is this Pan-Slavism. It's a movement to unite Slavic peoples. So Russia wanted the Slavic people to be together, and it would also give them more access to the Black Sea. So they saw themselves as protecting the Slavs, all right, and they would gain access. And Austria-Hungary didn't like that. They were not allies with Russia. So the spark was when Austria-Hungary annexed Herzegovina, Bosnia-Herzegovina, right here in 1908. All right, now this is leading up to the spark. Maybe this is the fuse. And they annexed it, right? And already these people wanted independence after the Ottoman Empire, and they don't want to be part of Austria-Hungary. And this angered Serbia, which is right here. They viewed the Bosnians as a homeland for Serbs, but also Slavic people also lived throughout this area. So this angered the Russians, who view the Bosnia as a Slavic nation and rival to Austria-Hungary. So if Austria-Hungary is taking this over, Serbs don't like that, Russians don't like that, and of course Russia sees this as more of, invading into their territory, at least ethnically and culturally. And then this happens. Serb student assassinates Archduke and his duchess. Okay, so we see the heir to the Austria-Hungarian throne, right? He visited Sarajevo, Bosnia in June 28th, 1914. Okay, so this is late June 1914. He and his wife are assassinated. They drive through, there's an assassination attempt, they throw some bombs, doesn't go off, ends up killing someone else. On his way to visit the hospital to see how they're doing, anyways, they take a wrong turn and he's assassinated by a Serbian terrorist group called the Black Hand. Okay, the Black Hand resented the Austria-Hungary annexation of Bosnia. And so this assassination was the spark that ignited the powder keg of Europe. Okay, so there's all this tension going on, and this was like, boom, this little thing happened. It wasn't the main cause, not even close. One assassination would not, but this is the heir to the throne of, and it looks like Bosnia might have been, it looks like Serbia might have had some play in it. Okay, and of course they're aligned with Russia. All right, so if that's the spark, I guess this would be the fire. So we see Austria-Hungary blame Serbia for Ferdinand's death. Serbia is aligned with Russia, so Russia backed its fellow Slavs in Serbia and mobilized its military. That means moving into areas. And then Germany dreaded the possibility of fighting France and Germany and Russia at the same time. So they started mobilizing its military to the borders. And then because and then Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia in July 28th, 1914. They did see them as the cause of it, okay, the cause of the assassination. So Germany declared war on Russia just a couple days later. Germany, Russia, and then France 2 days later declared war on you as well. And then Germany, and then the alliance system kicked in, and basically these three were against France and Russia and the United Kingdom, and they were against them, of course, but it all started in Serbia with the assassination of Arch Ferdinand. Him. All right, and so this started our Great War. And that's pretty much it. Now, there's a couple things I want to show out real quick. There's a satirical map that's pretty interesting to look at now. So take a look at that, and you could kind of explain why one is maybe in the position they are, looking at certain ones, or maybe what they are wielding. So speak on that in your notes. And then I just like this cartoon. You can pause it and look at this for a second, but it basically shows how if you attack a friend Serbia, you're going to attack you. You know, Russia declares war on Austria-Hungary, and then Germany declares war on Russia, and then France declared war on Germany. So it's kind of fun to look at. And then here's the result. You know, finally the First World War has started, and you know, USA walks in, they come into it, and actually Russia ends up leaving because they're having a revolution and they're getting their butts kicked so bad. They just lose so much in their war, so many more people than anyone else. All right, and there was no victory party. It was just a shame and a mess, and just millions of people died, and it didn't seem like they died for much. Okay, and here's all the causes of World War I. If you want to look at this diagram, it's pretty cool. All right, that's it. Take notes, and we got our quiz on Friday. See ya.